Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Learning Chess Classics. In today's video, we have chosen the game between Luckis and Keres. And the reason why I chose this game is because this is a great attacking game. And over here, I call this game as one of a perfect examples or a case study in why you should castle early and how to attack your opponent if his king is in the center. And Keres perfectly shows us that. So without wasting much time, let's go into the game. This was a two knights defense, and over here white played the move knight to g5. Now the purpose of knight to g5 is that he wants to attack on the f7 square with the knight and the bishop, and the only move for black is to play the pawn to d5, and after takes knight a5 is the only move for black. This is theory, but let me quickly tell the viewers that what happens if you take on the pawn on d5. This is already a mistake, and there is a well-known trap on this. White can now sacrifice his knight takes f7, poking the king and the queen and the rook. King f7 is forced, and after queen to f3 check, the knight on d5 is getting attacked. So you cannot go king to e8, because if you go king e8, then you just lose this, you lose the material back. White is a pawn up, and white has a very comfortable position. So after king e6, white generally plays the move knight to c3, putting more pressure on the d5 square. After a move like knight c2 e7, no, over here white can already play d4, he can castle, and white is completely better and is close to winning actually, because even though black is materially up, but given that the king is in the center, white is going to launch an attack and white is going to win this game. So over here knight to a5 is the only move which was played in the game. Now over here white cannot go bishop to e2 directly, because then you just take this pawn, the knight is hanging, black has a good center, and the entire purpose fails. So in in modern theory, bishop b5 check is the most common move. After c6 takes. Now the bishop goes to e2, and this is now again another well-known theory position. Black is the pawn down, but he has some I mean he has some advantage in development, because this knight can be forced out with some moves like h6, and after knight f3 you can go e4, knight e5, and this is again well-known theory, and bishop d6, bishop c5. So black has advancement in development at the cost of a pawn, and this is again theory, so we will not go much into theory. Now in this game, the move that was played was pawn to d3. h6 was played by black. Now again, this knight cannot go to h3, because for obvious reasons, if you go pawn to h3, you can play bishop g4, and after a move like f3 you will take on the knight. The structure is bad. Now the d5 knight is falling and black is completely winning, because look at the king. I mean, the king cannot castle, the queen is open, and this is not looking good for white. So knight h3 is not an option. So the move that was played was knight to f3. Now in this position, many of you might be thinking, okay, now you can just play the bishop to d6, normal developing moves. But guys, this is also an example of dynamic play versus static play. So when you play static, when you are materially up, and when you just want to trade off pieces, play simple chess. But over here, black is a pawn down. Oops, black is a pawn down, and black wants to play dynamic chess. So over here, black plays the move pawn to e4. Now, what is the purpose of pawn to e4? Of course, you are hitting this knight, but more importantly, you are putting the pressure on the pawn on d3, which is an overloaded piece. You cannot take the pawn on e4, because the pawn on d3 is supporting the bishop on c4, and because of that, you cannot capture this pawn. Now, in this position, queen to e2 was played. Now you cannot take the knight because this pawn is pinned. So in this position, what Keres played was, first he took on the bishop on c4, and now what was the idea of taking on the bishop on c4? Now when you look at the position, black has double bishop, the position is opened up, and both the bishops are very strong. Now I want you to pause the video over here and find the best move for black. So now in this position, the first move that comes to your mind is the move bishop to g4, saying that, you know what, this knight is pinned, so let me play the bishop to g4 and put more pressure on the f3 square. But this is not a good move, because over here white can simply go h3, and after bishop h5 g4, yes, you did open up the pawns on the white's king side, but this again is not a very good position for black, because I mean white can now play the knight to c3. This knight can come to d4, the bishop can come to e3, and white has ideas of long castling. And now you feel that the bishop on g6 is not doing much. I mean the bishop on c8 was better. So over here in this position, what Keres actually played was the move bishop to c5. Now over here, it is important to note that if that what is the idea of bishop to c5? The idea is that black wants to castle, and say that that he wants to attack this knight. Now let me show you that if white plays a move like knight to c3, of course black will castle. You cannot take this pawn on e4, because after takes, queen takes, you have the move rook to e8, pinning the queen and the king. The knight cannot come to e5 because of f6. And similarly over here in this position, after bishop to c5, if white castles, black can simply castle. Now the knight is getting attacked. The only square for the knight is knight f to d2. Now the bishop can come out, and after queen e1, now you just look at this position, look at the white's pieces, like no, all the pieces are still in the first rank. They are not yet developed. Whereas you look at black has developed all his pieces, his rooks are connected. In these positions, black always has the idea of pushing the pawn to e3, opening up the e file. The rook on e8 is going to jump to e8, and black is having a dream position. So that is why after the move bishop to c5, Luckis in this position played the move knight f to d2. Now after castling, he played the move knight to b3. Now this bishop is attacked. Now most of us in this position would play a move like bishop to d6, because the bishop is getting attacked. Now this again is not a good move, guys, because after this move we are allowing white to play moves like knight to c3. The bishop can come to d2 or e3. White can long castle, and white is going to have a good game. So over here I want you to pause the video and try to come up with the move that Keres played over here. In this position, what is the priority? The priority is fast development, and once again I will repeat, the priority is to exploit the king that is still in the center. The king on e1 is still in the center. So over here Keres played the move bishop to g4, which is a great move, because over here let me show you that why this is a good move. And over here, let's say if white plays a move pawn to f3, you can simply take the pawn, and after gf3, white may think that, you know what, I'm attacking both the bishops. The bishop on c5 is getting attacked, the bishop on g4 is getting attacked, but he has forgotten the fact that over here black has the move rook to e8. Once again, guys, because the king is in the center, black always wants to open up this e file. Black wants that his major pieces come in the center and launch the attack, because white's king is in the center. So over here, after bishop to g4, again another move like queen to d2 is again not possible, because over here black has a beautiful move pawn to e3. And the idea is the same, guys. Like after fe3, you can already play bishop into e3, because after bishop e3, once again the queen cannot take because of same ideas. So that is why after bishop to g4, the only move for white is queen to f1, which was played in the game. Now in this position, the bishop on c5 is attacked. So Keres played the move bishop to b4 check. And over here, the point is, that is the main essence of the game, which Keres also said, that Keres actually explained this idea after the game, is that the idea of bishop b4 check was to provoke the move pawn to c3. The point being that after pawn to c3, the bishop comes to e7, and why he wants to provoke a move like pawn to c3 is because now the pawn on c3 blocks the white knight on b1 from coming to c3, and it also weakens the d3 square. So his idea is to get the knight to d7, e5 and d3, and that is why pawn to c3 was not played. Also, knight to c3 is not an option. Knight to c3 was played in the game, but the other move, that is bishop d2, is not an option, because after bishop d2 you can trade off the bishops, and now you can play the move rook to e8 with the idea to push the pawn to e3. And over here white has not many defenses. For example, if he thinks that he can play the move pawn to h3 and try to remove the bishop, it's of no use because black directly goes e3. If you take the bishop, you take the knight with check, and after king takes d2, you have knight e4 check, queen g5 coming, and black is going to launch a good attack. White's king is always going to suffer in the center. So that is why after bishop b4 check, knight to c3 was played. Now, guys, once again, I will repeat that when your opponent's king is in the center, you want to blast open the center. And that is why, like, no, like in a position like this, you would want your rook on f8 to come to e8, control the e file. You would want to open all the files. You would want the queen and the rook to control the d file, and that is why in this position, Keres played the move pawn to c6 with the idea of opening up the position. Now, of course, you cannot take on this pawn directly because queen d1 comes with a mate, and this is a beautiful mate. Taking support of the bishop on g4, the knight on c3 is pinned because of the bishop on b4, and this is like a beautiful checkmate. So, in order to take the pawn, h3 was played, and after bishop h5, g4, now the bishop is no longer controlling this diagonal. So now pawns were traded. Now in this position, Luckis erred and did a small inaccuracy with the move bishop to d2. The idea is that white wants to go and long castle. So guys, in this position, I would request you to pause the video and try to come up with the move that Keres played in order to avoid white from long castling. And over here, Keres played the brilliant move pawn to e3. Now, what is the purpose of this pawn sacrifice? I mean, the idea is that now you keep the king in the center, and you open up the position. The knight is now going to jump to e4. The queen can come up, can come to h4, and you know what? After this move, Keres actually explained that a pawn sacrifice of tremendous force, the idea of which is to keep the enemy king in the center and clear the way for the black pieces on the king's side. White will now have to suffer a violent attack. Now over here, bishop takes e3 is not possible because knight e4 comes. You put pressure on this knight on c3. The queen can come to f6, and this is like going to be an attack. For example, after knight e4, let's say move like a3 is played, bishop c3, bc3, and now you can just play queen to f6. You're putting pressure on this pawn, and after, let's say, a move like bishop to d4, you can go queen f3. The rook is going to come on e8. The king is trapped over here, and this is like completely a losing position for white. So that is why after this move, f takes e3 was played. Now this is also not that white is going to survive the attack. This is a completely losing position for white. But what is the beauty of this game is that the way how Keres actually punishes his opponent and launches the attack. Now in this position, he now gives up his double bishop advantage. He takes on the knight on c3, and you will understand why he took the knight on c3, because after knight takes c3, now you cannot take it with the bishop, because if you take with the bishop, now black has the move knight to e4. He has ideas of queen to h4 check, and white is completely, he's demolished. If he plays the move pawn to h4, now black can play knight to g3, forking the queen and the rook, and you can just take the rook and win the game. So that is why after bishop takes c3, b takes c3 was played, and now you can see that white is 2 pawns up. Yes, white is 2 pawns up, but look at his pawn structure. He has 3 pawns on the c file. Now over here, knight e4 can still be played. Knight e4 is also a good move. The point being that you are still threatening queen h4 check. But in this position, what Keres played was he took on the pawn on c2, and the idea was not to take on material or to chop off a pawn. The idea was that he wants to keep his king in the center. The idea is that he wanted to keep the white's king in the center, not giving him a single chance to castle. Now this position is of course completely lost for white, but in this position he still played the move knight to d4, trying to attack the bishop on c2. Now guys, try to pause the video and come up with the move that Keres played. Over here, Keres played another beautiful move, and no, you will just enjoy this because in this he actually played the move knight to e4. Now, what is the point of knight to e4? Of course, knight to g3 is not the plan. The plan is to get the queen to h4 with check, and if you think you can take the bishop on c2, but of course you can't because now queen d2 comes with a mate. So this was such a beautiful move. You know what? You put the knight in the center, you open up the queen's diagonal, giving threatening a check on d4. This knight is now pinned. The knight cannot take on the bishop. And just look at this. You know what? You have threats of knight g3. You have threats of queen d2. If the knight moves, you have queen h4 coming. And this is like a dream position for any player. And all this is happening only because white's king is in the center. And white's and he's launching an attack. Now in this position, pawn to h4 was played to stop the idea of queen h4, which was a very, 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 very nasty threat. So in this position, another beautiful move was played, pawn to c5. Now, what is the idea of pawn to c5? Of course, you want to get rid of this knight because you have threats of queen d2. So knight f3 is the only move defending the bishop. And now in this position, he played the move knight to g3, poking the queen and the rook, queen to g2. He took on the rook on h1. Now came bishop to e4. And in this position, Luckis resigned because the rook is coming to b8. The queen is going to go to f6, putting more pressure on the f3 square. The other rook will jump in. He is an exchange up. And just look at this position. I mean, white has no play. So after bishop e4, white resigned the game. And Keres managed to win this game. Now, this is actually one of my favorite games in attacking. And the reason why I decided to show this game is because I feel that this is a perfect game where Keres demonstrates beautifully how to attack when your opponent's king is in the center. And I mean, there were many great moments in this game. So I think that the first of them was directly when he played the move pawn to e4 in the very opening. You know what? Over here, pawn to e4 was played, and after queen to e2, I think the move bishop to c5. I mean, when you understand the beauty of this move, that black says, I want to castle, I want to keep my king safe, I want to keep your king in the center, and I have good development. My pieces are going to get developed very soon. My bishop will come out on g4 and stuff. And white, of course, started making errors right from the opening. For example, after knight d2, castles, knight b3. You don't save your bishop, but instead you go for quick development. The bishop comes out to g4, and given that the king is in the center, you can never play a move like f3. And black is always willing to give up, to remove this pawn from on the e4, because black also wants to open up the file. And over here, queen f1 becomes the only move, and then you give check, knight c3, and now this move pawn to c6. Another beautiful move, trying to open up the center, blast open the center. And you know what? The reason why I love this game is because Keres followed all the chess principles. The principle says that when the opponent's king is in the center, you want to open up the center, and Keres is not doing something which is rocket science. He's just following simple principles. He plays the move pawn to c6, and after trading of the trading of the pawns, when white plays the move pawn to bishop to d2 with the idea of castling and trying to escape from black's attack, Keres says no, you can't, because you know what, I'm going to play the move pawn to e3. This is such a beautiful move, ensuring that the white's king is in the center. And I think after this, the game just quickly ended so fast. And I think that is why I decided to share this game, because I love this game. This was such a beautiful move, knight to e4. I think this was one of the best moves that I came across recently. And this move, this entire game, I was so shocked seeing this game. So I decided that I have to share this game with all of you. One of my favorites game for sure. And guys, with this, and this is how the game ended. So I learned a lot from this game. So if you also learned a lot, if you also enjoyed this game, guys, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel. And also, guys, if you want to see any particular game or attacking game, if you want us to analyze that, please write down in the comments and I'll be happy to share that game. So guys, with that, see you soon in the upcoming videos, in the upcoming episodes. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you enjoyed, then stay tuned and we will have a lot more games coming. So thank you guys and see you soon.